All right, so we are live. As soon as I hit the button, then it tells me on my other screen that we're actually, broadcasting before I realize it. So thanks everybody for being here today. This is our sixth Resolute video series. We've done a couple of them live so far, and it's been fun. Today we have, of course, Andrew Hunter and myself, and we have our special guest, which is Aneesha Hargrave. Aneesha, let's start out telling us a little bit about who you are.
Sure. Yeah. I first of all, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun already. I am a product developer and operations specialist. I'm located here in the Bay Area of California, newly located from the East Coast. Been an East Coast girl my whole life, and really came out here for a change of scenery, new opportunities, and the weather. So and then there was COVID. So it was like
The weather in the Bay Area? You went to the
yeah,
Bay.
I mean,
You
uh,
expected it to be warm, and then you got there, and it was freaking freezing.
but we've even as we're transcending into going into the fall, we still have like 75-degree days of just nice weather, sunshine, and
Yeah.
trees, and grass, and all those things. So I love New York, but yeah, I'm loving the Bay Area. But yeah, and to start the year, things were going really strong, and I think a lot of folks can relate to that. And I saw a post somewhere on the socials yesterday that was like, the year has been January, February pandemic, and then hopefully we'll get a little December, back to ourselves. So yeah, it's been great being out here. I love our industry. I love talking about it. So I'm happy to be here today.
Awesome.
Let me just also say that uh, Aneesha is, I believe she's being modest, but I believe that Aneesha is both a thought leader, but also maybe more importantly, or as importantly, an action leader, because she's had a career of putting smart ideas and concepts into action, and then watching people line up out the door of her restaurants to eat those ideas. And so she'll share her insights as we go, but I just wanted to say a special thank you.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Joining us. We always, Andy, can I talk about our takeaways?
Please do.
All right, so we always try to do to give you guys, our audience, some takeaways, and this is about 3, because we think that's manageable both for us and for you. And so I think we have a little bit different thought or thinking process about trends amongst the 3 of us, and so I put them together in a little package that I call Stunts, Fads, and Trends. And we're going to define those, but as a takeaway, after they're defined, and you think about, applying ideas in your restaurant menus and systems, et cetera, I think it's a good idea to use those as a filter: Stunts, Fads, and Trends. Realize ingredients are important considerations when you're thinking about trends, but they're rarely trends in and of themselves, at least in my sometimes less than humble opinion. I think sometimes I read blueberries are a trend, and I love blueberries, and in fact do business with the Blueberry Council, but blueberries aren't really a trend in and of themselves. They're part of a trend of better for you. They're part of a functional food trend. They can be part of several things, but not necessarily of their own. And then the third thing was, trends can be powerful tools in developing menu and menu items, but they can also misdirect you. They can take you down a rabbit hole if you're not careful, and you can hop on the hop tea trend, so to speak, that I read about this morning. No offense to the publisher of that comment. And I just wonder if that's good advice. So with that, without further ado, let's get started.
Awesome. Well, start us off with the first point, Andrew, and what your thoughts are on that, and then we can start to banter.
Okay, so with I think the best way to start is with stunts, fads, and trends, and I like them because I like these as filters because they represent three different things that I've identified over the years. So a stunt is something that's generated to grab attention, get media attention, get people in the door. One of my favorite stunts is Burger King. This was a long time ago, but I love this example. They publicized a left-handed Whopper. And that's funny, right? I mean, I think that's really you gotta have a sense of humor to do that. And I don't know numbers about traffic that it drove, but it did drive traffic. And so a stunt is something to get publicity. It's something to grab attention. It's something to drive people through the door. It's usually a stunt usually has the shelf life of a day or maybe up to a week. Think about if we're going to make gardening analogies, think about stunts as cut flowers. They're here, they're beautiful, they serve a purpose, and then they're gone. The next one is a fad, and I think fads are really, really, really important. To the gardening analogy, they're an annual, right? Because you have to plant them every year. Maybe with fads, they last a couple of years or a couple of seasons, but by and large, they last for a significant amount of time, but they burn a bright light and then they sort of fade away. And we'll talk more about what some fads are, but I think that they're really, really important as we think about how to be strategic in the trend marketplace. Mm-hmm. And then trends are perennials. They don't really ever go away. They just keep blossoming every year. And they do have a bright light. And then once they're sort of nova-like characteristics fade, they just get they don't go away, they just get woven into our fabric. My favorite example of a trend is, even though it's an ingredient, is chipotle, the chili pepper. You can map that very easily and watch it go. Watch how it rose to prominence and how it has stayed with us and is really an important seasoning in our lexicon. So anyway, I'll pause there and let others participate. But those are three filters that I think are important.
Yeah, one of the notes that I wrote down, Andrew, as you were talking, is like, I've seen this firsthand. Is that stunts, fads, and trends should be thought of as a tool, but not a strategic plan. There are a lot of agencies and organizations out there that create trend reports every year, and they can be valuable and useful tools, but they should not be a roadmap for success for your brand. And
let me ask you a question. About that, Aneesha, because when he was saying that, I was kind of thinking, of it in some ways opposite of you, thinking, can you think of stunts, fads, and trends as part of a strategy? So you're planning to do a stunt, and here's what it might be. You're planning to do a fad. Certainly, it's not a way to build your brand around, doing things that are short-lived, which I think is your point.
Yeah. And I should have clarified. So I believe that they cannot be a strategy for a long-term success, right? Like you have to have some foundational structure about your organization in terms of strategy that doesn't count on something that is so short-lived, that does rely on something as fickle as people's attention, for these things that are happening so quickly, especially in the age of social media and how fast we receive information and all the places that we receive it from. People move on rather quickly. So that day that you're hoping your stunt or your fad or even the trend hangs around could be 30 minutes, right? And then if you're counting on a certain amount of sales to generate from that, you could be horribly let down.
I think you just encapsulated why it's really a challenge for brands out there to jump on the trend train, so to speak. And I always cringe when I see brands say, "Well, hot tea is a trend. We're gonna do that," but they don't even serve tea or what have you, right? And so I think we risk menu creep, menu envy, all of those sorts of bad things that dilute a menu and make it less than relevant.
Yeah, and you know, for me, like, know your audience, know your customer base. Like, is that something that your customers are going to want? And do you know that that works for your restaurant, whether it's a single one-off restaurant or if it's a chain, and can you pull that off with success? And those are some of the things that I would think about as an operator or as a business owner.
I've noticed that a lot of, some of the more fun stunts or even fads can also kind of introduce a guest who might not be your guest to your brand and get them to want to come back. Maybe they saw a stunt, or said, "Oh, that sounds interesting, go check it out." And then all of a sudden they're becoming more of a regular guest, which is really what folks are hoping for, right? They're hoping to convert those guests more regular, to more, regular guests, So it seems to me, that properly planning a stunt, or doing something, that then you can lead people in. What I think is interesting when people do a stunt or a fad that really works with something else that they're doing well already. And I don't have a good example off the top of my head, but if they're building on a brand structure that they're already using, and then people are like, "Wow, I do like this place. I'll be back."
Agreed.
One of the things that comes to mind when you say that, Andy, is like Homaro Cantu, the now passed away chef from Chicago, brilliant chef, and he was a great chef, but molecular gastronomy was part of his part of what he did. It was part of his character and his food, and so he made edible menus. I thought it was very clever. Obviously, it's a stunt, I think, because do you really want to eat your menu? But I didn't have the pleasure, but evidently it actually tasted good because he used different kinds of soy-based inks from a proper kind of printer. He wasn't poisoning people. But it's a great example of drawing attention to yourself, but being completely on brand, because molecular gastronomy was his thing. And you decide what you want, and then you eat your menu, and then out come the smoking fir leaves or whatever it is, and it's just part of the experience. So he used a stunt really, I think, effectively to draw people in, and then to say, "You've never been here before. This is what we do."
Exactly.
That seems to me like an incredibly well-crafted LTO to a certain extent. The term LTO is used to classify so many things, but most people use it just to, hey, whatever reason, we got to have something different, as opposed to something that's really tied to who they are.
Yeah. And sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
No, go ahead. I have a question for you next, Aneesha.
I was going to say, that's a great point that you brought up, because in a past role that I had for a long time with a multi-unit chain, one of our core focuses was LTOs, and doing a number of them, far more than any of our closest competitors would do a year. But they were part of a core strategy for the organization to create new news around the brand and an incremental periods throughout the calendar year. And it brought people back, but it was a part of a larger scheme, because we worked on our core menu throughout the year just to understand how customer choices were changing, how we could continue to meet their needs, and how the LTOs could fill in some of those gaps that weren't that made it possible for us to do things that weren't feasible on the core menu.
That's what I was going to ask you about. I think you guys did a really great job. And I wonder how many of your guests would come in. Yeah, I'm sure I doubt you have these numbers, but how many of your guests would come in expecting to get a simple salad with a straightforward dressing like ranch, and then see these other really interesting and intriguing ideas, but still stick to their simple salad, but keep coming back to you because they could see this great stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because in strategy meetings, we would talk about how can we better understand what percentage of our core customer base are, they're adventurers with food. They want to explore the new thing and the unknown, and to be introduced and taught about, and in turn learn about maybe a different food culture or an ingredient that they weren't familiar with. And so, there was a number that we would sort of float around that seemed to be accurate. But by and large, especially as the brand started to expand to newer and unknown markets to us at that time, we were starting to get a better idea of that customer you're talking about, Andrew, that plain Jane eater. I want a Caesar salad. I don't want you to do anything crazy with just the Caesar, And so it really allowed us to focus on making the main thing the main thing. And for us, that was making really good salad dressings, really good ingredients, meeting the mark every time. And then you can do the crazy stuff, right? Like, so make a good Caesar dressing for that core customer. Make sure the lettuce and all the, choppings or ingredients that go into it meet the mark. And then you can do some of that stuff for some of your fringe customers that want the more esoteric ingredients and salads and such. So we had to get that right. And I think that's important for any brand, is to get your core product right, to get the things that your customers expect for you to get right every day. And then you can go branch out and start to do some of those other fun things.
So, but you guys really developed a brand that not only gave you permission, but required you to do those LTOs.
100%. But, it's interesting, the core of the customers that we spoke to and that we surveyed, they really focused on our main menu, on our permanent menu, year round. And there was only a small percentage compared to that really great core customer base. There was only a small percentage of those customers who were willing to really take a chance on those LTOs. And by and large, we would see them creep back into their normal choice patterns and go back to whatever their favorite thing is that they've either made up for themselves or that we have on the core menu. So by and large, people wanted what was there all the time, what they could rely on, what they knew and trusted, and what they already felt like and had been proven to them was worth their dollar.
So operationally, that presents challenges, right? When you think about production, how much of this product am I going to make, the dressing, the sauce, whatever it is that goes into making it. So I don't know if you can talk about that a little bit, but you got to think about PARs, you got to think about training, ordering, holding ingredients, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, 100%. And one thing is that the training and the information that needs to be disseminated to your team members and out into the field remains the same, no matter if you sell one or if you sell 5,000, right, of any given thing. So we still had to put in the same amount of effort and spend the same amount of money to make sure everybody was prepared to do the job the right way every time. So that is what put us in a difficult spot, is that there's no way to really save money there. So how in the world do you get more out of the LTO production? Like, how do you get more out of that money that you spent when you cannot really generate more customers, really, if you find yourself in a position where you can't get more customers to like these things and to buy them, right? So to your point, Andrew, we were creating we were estimating in the beginning of those LTOs, well before they launched, how much based on previous LTOs that we'd launched, or even if it was the same LTO that we were bringing back, how much do we think we're going to sell? And then you order those things, you plan for those things, the production teams are ready for those things, and everybody does their job according to those numbers. And somewhere along the way, it usually doesn't match up. Something falls way off or spikes. And you just have to have a plan and be nimble enough to react and have the right things in place in case whatever happens, going positive or negative. And so that's really what a lot of our management strategy was. It's like, do we have all the tools in place just in case XYZ happens? And continue to think of more XYZs, as we get better at it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've got a question about that. You'd said earlier, Aneesha, that, as you're talking about evolving LTOs and that you were also working on the core menu to evolve it forward as well. And then you also talked about, a lot of guests want to stay with what they're comfortable with. How do you balance keep evolving and keeping your core?
Yeah, so the way that I've seen a brand have success at that is that, we talk to our customers a lot, right? So throughout the year, even as we're working on LTOs, we're interacting with our customers who want to talk to us as well. And so we're doing surveys. As the brand became more mature and understood the importance of really reaching out to those customers, we started to do, some studies. And when we were conceptualizing new menu categories for the core menu, we would bring customers in, present these ideas to those customers in multiple markets to just better understand for the whole brand how these things resonate with those folks, and then take that feedback to heart and really adapt and mold our original idea into something that really speaks to those folks that we've gotten that information from. And when it lands on the menu, hopefully, we've done our job and really have just wholeheartedly scrutinized every aspect of this ideation and this innovation to the point that it means something to our customers and it fits the rest of our core menu and they want to buy it.
I've always wondered about that process. When you talked about talking to guests, I've been involved with a lot of chains where they're doing, of course, focus groups and that sort of thing. It's very expensive. It's difficult to do. There's a lot of preparation involved. And at the end of the day, you kind of get a limited voice. And I've participated in it in design field as well as watching the other customer interaction pieces. I've always wondered if there's a better way to get that same information without limiting it to such a small amount of people. I've always felt like you're risking a lot when you get a small amount of people in the room and they're the loudest voices and you base so much on them. I've always wondered if there was, a different way, to maybe do field testing where guests were involved. Andrew and I talked a while ago about presenting new concepts. And if you talk about a food hall or whether it's a new menu item or a new operator in the food hall or a new menu item, to kind of involve guests early on in like the testing process so that you're, hey, we're testing this item or this vendor and involve the guests in kind of like a public forum way that would yield a lot more response. I don't know if anybody's ever done that well, but it's an intriguing idea to me anyway.
Yeah, I definitely haven't. And focus groups were, I found them to be helpful, especially when conducted in multiple markets, right? So you're getting just a lot of different factors at play there. And so if you're giving the same information to all these different groups, you get to like aggregate all that data and hopefully there's some good information there that can help you not start the conversation, right, around what your strategy should be, but in my experience and when I've used it in my career, it's helped to refine an idea. It's helped to answer questions we had going into the focus group, but it didn't start the strategy conversation for us. And I think that made it the most helpful and allow for us to work through some of the noise that would be in the data and see right through to answer the questions we had.
So how about if we talk about a few trends, a few things that we think are trends, and then have some banter about those trends. You want to go first, Aneesha?
Sure. So
if it's
no, sure. So I have something that is not ingredient based, but in response to the current climate and what I've seen, and I've been paying attention to it quite a bit since the onset of the COVID-based restrictions around dining in and people still wanting what they want, and restaurants needing to survive and all those things that we know need to happen. And so I made a short list, but one of the terms that I've loved that's been floating around for a lot of different conversations has been the pandemic pivot. And so, my industry friends and I talk about it, but then also just in your regular life, it's applicable as well. But for restaurants specifically, brands, I think the brands that are getting it right and that have found success even during this really uncertain time period where restaurants, unfortunately, are finding themselves closing, the brands that are managing to stay afloat and even finding great success are not afraid to move away from things that no longer serve them. They're moving away from things, menu items, for instance, that really don't generate any revenue. Somebody was really passionate about it, probably loved the idea of it, wanted it on the menu, and it might have been on there forever, and so they kept it on there until now, where everything you produce has to be strategic and it needs to make you money. And so I've enjoyed seeing restaurants menus sort of evolve into this really exciting place where these are all your big hitters, right? Yeah. The numbers are telling you these are your big hitters, this is what you need to serve. And within that, they're able to now work on the things that logistically help them meet the mark every day, curbside and takeout. How good are you at that?
Yeah.
A lot of brands are really horrible at it. And some of it's not even their own fault. Like packaging is something that in my time with a startup here, when I came out to the Bay, that was a core focus for us. So it's what are brands getting right about packaging for off-premise dining? And what are they just like missing the mark on? And a lot of folks miss the mark because they just don't have time or the resources to do the work to really do the R&D on packaging and what could be the best fit for their specific menu items. And things like family meals have really been a hit across the industry. And folks are really starting to understand how to adapt their menu to group dining, even off premise. And within that, creating an experience that hopefully gets them close in the food sense to what you would have if you ate in the restaurant. Those are a couple of things that are on my list that I really pay attention to, that I've seen here in the Bay be successful, but have seen folks talk about throughout the industry.
So one of the things that came to mind when you were talking about the pandemic pivot is it's giving brands, if they're paying attention, it's giving them an opportunity to clean house a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? They can take things off that maybe the founder really wanted, but the founder is now an emeritus and what have you, or the founder's vote counts less because we're trying to survive.
Yep.
The other thing, kind of in the other direction with pandemic pivot, I work with Wolfgang Puck a lot, and restaurants like Spago really are challenged to find their place.
Yeah.
And in this pandemic world of ours. But one of the things that Spago did, they did a lot of really great things, but one of them that they did was they made fried chicken on Wednesdays. And it was Spago fried chicken. I mean, it was brine, it was double fried, it had all of these things. It came with these amazing biscuits. It had thyme and chives and, you know, all this kind of stuff in them. So they were, it was really special, but they sold out after the first, you know, after the first week. They did it every Wednesday, and after the first week, they, you know, they just had to make more and more and more because they didn't want to sell out. They wanted to serve everybody who would be willing to come, and their numbers just went like this. And so it was a great way to pivot to something that they wouldn't have done pre and probably post pandemic, but it worked really well for them.
What gave them the room to do that, as Aneesha was saying, is, you know, people had the freedom, right, to reduce their menus. What you just said is every single one of my clients is doing that. You know, chain folks are all, but pretty quickly everybody said, oh man, this is my excuse, or that was not the right word, but that I have now the freedom to get my menu much lower, where they were scared to do that before. They were scared of pushback. But the other result of that is that quality is now much better. We all know that doing less better works, right? You can concentrate on your core items that are what people come to your brand for. Do them better. You know, now is a perfect time to super analyze, are we doing that core item as best as we possibly can, or have we allowed it to maybe you know, our standard to go down over time as we were trying to do so much more with a much larger and larger menu. And the other thing that occurred to me when you were talking about, you touched briefly on, you know, the takeout obviously is, you know, convenience food, which, you know, the industry was already doing that, you know, and so it kicked everybody's ass. Like, okay, if you're not convenient to do business with, you better, you know, fucking get your shit together, right? And be easy to do business with, be convenient. And this is where it's really pays attention to have somebody, anybody, you know, from an outside look at your experience and analyze it critically. You know, the experience, your packaging, as you noted, it's really helpful. People are underwater. You know, what I've noticed, they're you know, even at a chain, they're where they have more resources, they're still just so busy trying to stay, you know, up on what they've got to do today. Having somebody else just really critically look at, you know, here's where what you may not see, you know, is not happening. Your experience isn't right. You know, I've talked to a number of physical experience with curbside as an example, is a great example. If you don't have like a nice big tent set up outside wherever you can, even if it's on the damn sidewalk, to set somebody out there during peak hours, even though it may seem like, well, geez, that's not efficient labor wise, what it tells people driving by is those people are easy to do business with. They're ready to do business with me. It's going to be convenient, right? And easy. So outward signs of convenience. So I went off on a rant there, but that's a couple of things I was thinking.
Yeah, rants are acceptable, right? I'll name off a couple and then we can talk about them. I think sustainability, and certainly with packaging, really getting a new life with curbside and takeout. Sustainability is super important. Plant-based options, I think, are really important, and doesn't mean that you can have really great plant-based options even if you serve, you know, animal. So in fact, you better have good plant-based options. So let's talk about plant-based options, and then one more, and then we can talk about them, is Marquee Ingredients. I think that we're all really tempted to think that hop tea is a trend. It's like candy, right? And
You're
so
really hitting on hop tea today, Andrew.
I know. Well, I saw it before. It was in my feed before I clicked onto this, and I just thought, wow, this is kind of maybe what's wrong with trend.
Andrew's killed the trend before it got
Yeah, it's dead.
Yeah, poor hop tea, right?
Yeah, poor hop tea.
But how do you use those marquee ingredients without changing direction, without being accused of menu creep, et cetera? How do you use them in an effective way? So that's maybe a whole topic in and of itself, but I do think that it's an important thing when we think about trends and how to incorporate them into our brands.
Definitely. Every time I see somebody come out with some marquee or some item that's featuring the ingredient of the time, I always wonder, does it matter? A lot of times it seems to be something that's not really very good to start with, and it seems kind of like a waste to me. I don't know, as a guest I look at that and go, why are they doing that? Just because it's popular now? Or have they really created some unique menu item that's amazing that they can be proud of? Or is it just, hey, we had to come up with an LTO, so this is what we did?
Yeah.
I think that is exactly the problem.
There's a lot of that in chain world. We're working on LTO, and we have to. And this is something else I want to talk to both of you about, because you're culinary people, obviously, and it's always been interesting to me in chain food service that culinary somehow lies underneath marketing.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely bizarre to me. I mean, this is a restaurant. People come here to eat it. I'm totally awesome that marketing people would have a voice, and maybe it's about the stunts, and maybe it's about positioning the menu, but that they're actually charged in a lot of chain restaurants for actually crafting the direction of the menu, which I find astounding.
Yeah.
My response to that might be a little controversial and even offensive to some people, but I think that a lot of times restaurant brands never realized or have forgotten that their job first and foremost is to serve food, right? And they get caught up in all the other things that they think are important as to why they exist, and then they realize that their food is bad, and their food is bad because the second part of my point is that they don't really respect, not always, of course, but a lot of times they don't always respect the people who are the chefs. And it's not necessarily seen as by the CEO who has 3 MBAs and a PhD. They're not necessarily seen as a legitimate professional. So they give it to the marketing people to guide the process. So I don't know if that sounds like I have a chip, but I do think that is real in terms of why we don't listen better to the culinary people, who, by the way, are probably eating out 2, 3, 4, maybe more times a week, going to different places and really have the best pulse, not through consumer data, but through experience, the best pulse about what's being served.
It's interesting because I know that I've been in situations where I felt a certain kind of way about marketing determining what the culinary vision should be. And like being a little pissed about it. Like, what do you mean? Like, we make the food taste good. How do you tell me what I'm supposed to cook or the ideas that I should be coming up with? But
right.
We all know that in this industry, like a lot of others, you have to be good at a lot of things at the same time. And you go into any number of restaurants and you'll see that they might just be good at the food. That's it. They're not good at telling people what it is, why they should like it, making it look pretty so that it's inviting and you want to order it, and they fail, right? So I think there's a purpose for marketing help to drive and shape what the whole picture looks like. And for some restaurants or restaurant groups and chains, that means that they determine what your core focuses are on the culinary side. Because I think in some of those places, it could be sort of directionless. You could just be out there coming up with stuff.
Mhm.
And that doesn't serve anybody any good. And you're spending a lot of money and resources to just come up with ideas that don't lead you anywhere. And for me, that just, I think about what the leadership is in the organization and what your goals are for that period of time, right? And if it means that marketing needs to help steer that conversation, I'm comfortable with that. How will we get there? But the food is the food. And in the end, it's up to the culinary team or the chef or whomever to really execute and get you there. But the vision can come from anywhere. I'm a firm believer in that.
So a good brand, and there are a lot of them out there, balance where the strategy comes from and how it's the ideas are turned into strategy, and how it's implemented and executed.
Exactly.
Yeah, I find I think that's really interesting. You hit on a couple of things, Nisha. It's overall vision, that people can lack, in a company where they're putting it to a department, as Andrew said, they're putting it on the CMO just because maybe they lack the vision personally to understand, so they're trying to figure it out. Or maybe the entire company doesn't have a solid vision of who they are and why are they there every day and what are they trying to do. Which to me, if you have that, if you have a clear purpose and a vision, then those conversations are much different. You as you said, it doesn't matter where the ideas come from, but that they can come from a number of places and they're not just driven by one perspective.
Yeah. Exactly. And a lot of times I found that marketing has that data, has that customer.
Yeah.
And so they're using something that's hard to compete with in terms of the emotional responses that we often have to things. So you're like, I have the numbers. The numbers are telling us we need to do ABC. Let's do ABC, and it's not so much about what I talked about in the beginning. I just really like this idea. It should be on the menu.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of that. And that's helpful because that's also wasteful and uses a lot of resources and in the end potentially doesn't really drive sales.
Yeah. I mean, you have to have a balance of risking, what you just said about, being able to have the freedom to put something out there as a test, because the reality is when whatever brand that was founded, it was likely not founded by someone with a bunch of numbers. It was founded by, not that there's anything wrong with numbers, as you said, they're really valid, but having a vision for something that somebody hasn't had yet. And it's a new discovery. That's how new things get created and innovated, by innovative people, right? So it's not data driven. Data driven backs something up and can give you some direction.
Exactly.
So what we're saying is communication and respect between departments is on trend.
And vision is necessary.
In design, I mean, I do design work. I am always, people are always kind of surprised because I want to get culinary input on what we're doing, and how the place looks, because it's part of the whole vision. You want to get everyone's opinions on it. Somebody has to make the call, and it works best when you've got visionaries that are sitting down in a room, kind of forging that path together.
Yeah.
That's why I like working with Andrew so much. Him and I view things the same in a number of ways, and different in others. But it's great to have partners within the different interdisciplines that can participate at that level.
So what do you think, Aneesha, about plant-based? Is it a mega trend? Is it something that's here to stay? Is it satisfying a finicky few? Does it give people who eat meat an option to explore? What do you think about plant-based options?
I consider plant-based something very permanent and here to stay. I think it serves a lot of purposes for different people. And, it can be a fad in some places where the brands that are carrying that fad make it exciting and really stunty feeling all the time. You think about, there's a brand called Slutty Vegan, and I think they're in Atlanta, and they've been a monster success because they've done something that we saw in the Northeast and like by Chloe and things like that, where they make plant-based food junky and fun and are removing that old stigma that to eat vegetables and plant-based food means that you won't have flavor, texture, and it won't be fun to eat. So I think there are brands like that that are bringing plant forward eating to a lot of folks who wouldn't normally consider it a part of their way of life. And they're starting to really understand that I do like vegetables in this way. I can eat this type of food and still feel healthier and better about my choices. And then I think a lot of folks are, and interesting during this pandemic period, a lot of folks are focusing on their fitness and their health and the choices that they're making around food. And going plant-based will never, I won't use an absolute there, but it can lead you to some really healthy choices and gives you a better starting point and a better opportunity to put yourself in just a better way of life and to be healthier on a lot of levels. And I eat a lot of plant-based, but I'm not a vegan. I don't want to be a vegan. Nothing against vegans. I like chicken. I like steak. I like a little pork. I want to eat those things, but I want to have just good balance in my diet. And I think Plant Forward helps provide some of that for folks who don't know how to do it otherwise without this Plant Forward movement. And, on the environmental end, there are a lot of positives there that help potentially us restore the earth and some of its natural resources that we're just using so much of to produce things like beef. So I think there are a lot of positives for why plant-based should and more than likely will be here for the long haul. People thought kale was a fad. Having that on your menu and doing fun and interesting things with it, or just regular, salady or just, braised greens kind of thing with it. And it's here to stay. And I think folks are looking for ways to be better in their health and to make better choices.
So I love Plant Forward, and I do think that that's a really smart movement to look at. And your comment about kale makes me think about the next trend on my list, which is nutrient dense food with benefits, right? And kale is a great example because it can fit into a number of menus across the spectrum of from fine dining to maybe not quick serve. Well, quick serve in terms of yeah, I think it fits with quick serve. But it's nutrient dense and
did Andrew just totally freeze?
He did.
Like,
while we wait for Andrew, I think
also dry.
Oh, there we go. Okay, we lost you.
Froze for a minute in this awesome position where you look like.
Yeah, I know. Well, I've seen a few of. It happens, right?
Yeah. No, I think
What were you going to say, Aneesha?
No, I was going to say, I think your point was really strong because when you look at the beverage industry for an example of where functional foods are becoming a strong player, Chipotle just did a deal with Tractor Beverage. And I remember looking at Tractor Beverage and speaking to the founder, and talking to their CEO with a brand that I previously was a part of. And their whole mission was to create well-sourced, well-produced, functional beverages that taste good, and bring them to the masses. And by and large, they were just going along, doing their thing, finding success, and finding that a lot of people wanted that too. And a lot of the big chains and just smaller ones didn't know how to do it in a way that financially made sense for their organization. And they've created that for a lot of brands, and landed a huge deal with Chipotle. And I think that says a lot. A brand as big and as wide sweeping as Chipotle across the world, wouldn't enter this deal if they didn't feel like it resonated with many of their customers.
I know about Tractor, and I feel like what a really smart decision for Chipotle. It feels like it fits. It doesn't feel like a wannabe or a tag on. It feels like we believe in all of these things that we talk about every day, and now we're bringing them into your cup.
Yeah, because you can't just do it for your food, right? Like, you can't just say we are this wholesome brand, or we believe this about food, and then your beverage program is trash, right? So
have this big glass of sugar.
Yeah, that doesn't match. And here, I fully recognize that people want what they want. Like, Diet Coke is still a thing. People like lose their minds over Diet Coke in a way that I thought surely had faded. And people had like moved away from Diet Coke, especially as soft drink sales in this country continue to plummet. And those major brands are trying to find ways to not only plug those holes, but to capitalize on some of the new beverage movements that are happening. So, yeah. Yep, I think.
Lost you again, Andrew. I was looking at the slutty, the slutty vegan. That is not what I expected. I just looked up slutty vegan while you were chatting, and their menu is not at all what I was expecting. It's just big giant sandwiches, and it looked, like a million calories each.
Yeah, exactly. Because, some people they're not necessarily looking for the low calorie option. They just want to feel better about the choices that they're already going to make, right? So if you're already going to eat that sandwich, I feel better that it's only plants. Like, there's a lot of that. And so people want to just feel better about their choices. These things aren't going to drive choices. They're just going to confirm whether or not you're making the right choice in your mind, I think.
Confirming your own belief system.
That's all you want. You just want a little validation.
Are you back with us, Andrew?
Yeah, maybe I'm the one who keeps going in and out. I have two boys Zooming for high school.
But that's okay.
It reminds me, we're not talking about plant-based here, but it reminds me of the heart that a lot of brands used to, and some of them still do, put on their menus, and those are often the least popular items on the menu. Because I've gone to XYZ and I want to have, indulgent food, and then anyway, it just makes me realize that, or want to express that people who are eating plant-based or are vegetarian or vegan or whatever aren't necessarily health food. They just don't want to eat animals for any number of, a long laundry list of reasons. And so, so they still do want that big decadent two-handed sandwich. So.
Exactly. I mean, look at brands like Impossible. They're not made for vegans, right? They're made for flexitarians among us who, again, just want to feel better about their choices. I don't know a lot of vegans that want a burger that looks like it could bleed.
Yeah.
That seems like the opposite of what they want.
Yeah.
And even though Impossible isn't a whole lot better for you or better for you at all than a regular burger, I still do feel better after I eat an Impossible burger and maybe it's psychological.
Yeah.
But at my age, it's really hard for me to eat a big burger these days, right?
Yeah.
I don't feel good.
And just probably smarter, you know, like it's a smarter choice not to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have about 5 minutes left, Andy. Are we? Do we want to figure out how to wrap?
Yeah, we've got a few things left. You know, you had a couple of other items left on your list. Maybe you could summarize what those are, and then talk about our takeaways. Did you get that, Andrew?
No, say it one more time.
You got a couple things on your trends to watch list, and then probably hit our takeaways.
So trends to watch, smashing flavors. Think about flavors that, the perfect example is the Kogi taco, smashing together Mexican and Korean and coming up with something that's really truly a brilliant composition of different flavors that are incongruous or seemingly incongruous, working together in complete and utter harmony. So think about smashing flavors. Nobu, if you want examples of somebody who's a master at smashing flavors together, to me, it's Nobu. There are a lot of great chefs out there doing it, but Nobu is brilliant at smashing flavors together. And maybe it's his Peruvian background with his Japanese ancestry and sensibilities, etc. Sweet and savory collisions, I think, are a great thing to think about. Peruvian ají chilies mixed together with blueberries in a crema dressing with brown sugar or agave seems like a great collision of sweet and savory together. And then I guess the last one, and we'll let you guys wrap up too, is just always remember that delicious is always on trend. In some ways, it doesn't much matter what you're making as long as it's delicious. And people come back for delicious because they think about delicious when they're not there at your establishment.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. One of the things before we wrap up is I wanted to ask you both, kind of about how do you help integrate a long-term strategy that involves constant evolution, kind of on purpose. I know that you both do this, as we talked earlier. I see so many people not doing that, a kind of an on purpose approach to, if you're an operator and even a small operator, maybe you only have one unit. I constantly ask people to describe kind of their vision to me in a number of categories. One is, how do you plan on growing your business? How are you enhancing experience? What's your menu, kind of evolution strategy, and what are you doing? I know that might be a large topic, and maybe we even want to cover that. I'd probably like to cover that separately with you both. Like, we could have a whole episode about, let's talk about crafting a menu strategy. But real quickly, as we talk about the takeaways of today, which is trends and stunts and all that, what are your thoughts around crafting an overall strategy?
I would say, what we've been saying all along on the call is and something that I focus a lot on, is that it starts with the vision of the brand, like knowing where you're starting from and what your ultimate goals are as a brand, like where you want to see yourself, and then creating steps to get you there. What are the benchmarks that help get you there? And sometimes those benchmarks mean we should look at entertaining the idea of doing these things with our menu along the way. But I think it's very difficult for brands to really make those decisions really far out, because we see that things change and impact our decision-making on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And you have to really be able to distill all those factors through the lens of your vision, so that you can see what should stick and what shouldn't for your long-term goals. And sometimes it means doing nothing, right? And letting things play out. And sometimes it means things are stale on your menu and need to go. There are a lot of reasons on the back end why you and how you would make some of those changes to your menu and build strategy around it. Cost, you want to streamline production, SKU optimization, and things like that. But I think for me, like I said, it goes back to what the core vision is and strategy of the brand and what some of your goals are there that will help direct you into those decision-making around your menu.
Good thoughts.
Yeah, I think I can't really add to that. I think it encapsulates your question really well, Andy. And best of luck to everybody as you try to do that really hard thing.
It's hard. It's hard. And you more than likely would get a lot of it wrong, right? And have to be nimble enough, like I said, about the pandemic pivot, to leave things that don't serve you, right? And abandon some of those ideas that don't work. And when you scrutinize them through all of your tools internally that you have to do that, and you see that this is not going to do what we think it's going to do, leave it where it is and move on to a new, fresh idea. And being open to fresh ideas helps that a lot.
So one last thing is, I think, you know, I love baseball and I love watching baseball, and I look at
I'm gonna hope he comes back here. Just it's so funny that he keeps freezing up on us. Yeah. I'm trying to come watch some baseball, by the way.
What's that?
No, I'm trying to come watch some baseball, but you froze again in mid-sentence. You were about to say something really important.
I love watching baseball. I watch these guys who are best in the league and their batting average is 300 or 275. And I think, so that means that 27% of the time, or maybe 30% of the time, they get a hit. And so I think in restaurants and menus and business,
oh, this is so frustrating.
This is real life. This is real life right now.
I know, but I want him to get this thought out because I feel like it's a good one. Okay, you said we lost you right when you went into it.
Oh, dang it. I'm going to go real fast. I think that we expect to bat 1,000.
Yeah.
100% of the time, we're going to have a brilliant idea, and it's just not the way it works. Am I still live?
Yep.
So I heard somebody who have tremendous respect for a chef who he said, if I can get it right 30% of the time, I'm a genius, right? He didn't say he was a genius because he wouldn't, but that was the implication. So don't expect to get it right every single time, and be willing to you know, fiddle with things, for lack of a better word, to try to get it right.
Yep. And have people around that are willing to tell you when they believe we're getting it wrong. Yeah. Like, this is not working, this is why, and be open to that. Like, be open to the idea that you're getting it wrong.
And be open to letting people who aren't necessarily in the C-suite tell you about things that they believe are right.
That's right. Good ideas can come from anywhere.
Yeah, and boots on the ground are often the best.
That's right.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, we spent an hour, so we should probably wrap up. Aneesha, how do people get a hold of you? By the way, thanks for coming on. I can't wait to have you back because this was a good conversation. I think
this is great. I had a lot of fun. Yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn, of course. So I'm on LinkedIn. Just search for Aneesha Hargrave. If you're on the socials, across the socials, I am It's Just Food and the number 2.
Cool.
I post food things, not food things. But so that's how you can find me.
Awesome. Chef Andrew is at chefandrewhunter.com. And, you know, he's always around. So always busy working, but you can usually dig him out of his back cave there if you try real hard. I'm going to put your contact information in our notes. So thanks again, Aneesha, for coming on. I think this was a great conversation. I do want to get into, I think it'd be valuable for us to have a whole nother conversation just about how do you craft a strategy, you know, kind of, you know, loosely, what does that look like? I think there's a lot of folks at smaller restaurant chains and even more established ones. I'll tell you both of this, you know, they're afraid to engage folks like you because they feel like they're going to get creativity without the common sense and strategy behind it. When I know that Andrew excels at that, and he had told me that you do as well, is creating things that are based in strategy, and that's obvious from today's conversation. So thank you so much. And we will be back next week with something, and Aneesha, can't wait to have you back as well.
I can't wait to be back. Thank you both for having me and for the invite. This has been a lot of fun.
Good.
Thank you, guys.
See ya. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.